look, I was never like a Twitter head, like
Yeah.
jumping on the socials. My wife, that's her job, right? That's all she ever does. But being in the fantasy football space and all over social media now, and it I have to do it, but it's something that's difficult for me to just wrap my head around sometimes the amount of time that I'm on that. So I was wondering how you feel about social media as a necessary evil. Do you love it as something you lived with? I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I feel like my mentality and way that I've viewed social media has definitely shifted over the last handful of years. Part of it maybe it's just maturity and like having kids and
Mm,
stuff and just like realizing that I don't need to have arguments with people on the internet the way that I did in my like 20s,
sure.
let's say. Like I for real, like 10, 15 years ago when 15 years ago is around the time that I really started to dig into this stuff more, maybe like 13 years. But like in the early parts of that, like I would be going back and forth with people constantly on Twitter, and having these like
Yeah.
back and forths about player takes and stuff like that. And I don't have the time to do that anymore. It's like those were back in the day whenever like your biggest choice was what bar am I going to go to tonight? Whereas now I have like other human beings that I need to take care of, and
For sure.
I'm not going to be able to, just sit there and but like I think that to me, a place like Twitter, in particular, where a lot of the fantasy football space just kind of is and exists, or Blue Sky or whatever. I think it's more of just like a brand building place where people can get to
Yeah.
know you a little bit more, your sense of humor, that kind of thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be this place where you take things super seriously, where you gotta argue about player takes and you gotta argue about fantasy football strategy. Sometimes memes are totally fine, and just showing off, how you kind of view the world through that lens.
Yeah, I think that's a great and rational take. I don't think everybody on social media is always rational. Sometimes it's a
No.
place to blow off steam, right? And you just don't know everybody's situation. So I agree with that. But little do you know, JJ, that I invited you on the show to completely grill you about your Luther Burden wide receiver
Oh,
one take.
that's the downside
Not
of
sure.
social media right there. That's the downside of social media. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I just have one more question for you. Of course, we had to cold open JJ as he joins the show here, but we're going to do an official intro. JJ, my question to you is Will Farrell or Ben Stiller?
Ooh, I gotta go Stiller at this point, right?
Yeah.
Because of Severance and what's going on with
Ooh,
that show.
good
Like
call.
to me, it's just he's grown and developed into something so much more. I wasn't prepared for
Yeah.
that, but I think it's gotta be Stiller just because of the show.
It's a fair take. I absolutely loved Severance season one. I have not watched
Oh,
season two,
how do you
or if it's
finish,
even a season. Listen,
dude?
JJ, I'm
I might have to leave. Like, stop this show right now and go watch season two, my friend. I mean,
listen.
my goodness.
I love the show. Love the
Yeah,
show. I'll get there. No spoilers, but thankfully I don't watch TV anymore because, like we talked about, I'm trying to build
yeah,
this brand. But
yeah.
but you picked Ben Stiller, so here we go. Let's start the show.
What is this? A center for ants? What? How can we be expected to teach children to learn how to rank if they can't even fit inside the building?
What is up? Welcome into Adjust the Ranks. Of course, we have this guy JJ Zachariason here with us on the show. I am Jeremy Shulman at FF_Rebel on the Twitter machine, and we are here today to complete a. Let's see if we can get the thing down below the ticker. Yes, a Superflex tight end premium 4-round rookie mock draft with the one and only late round QB. We'll see if we force him to take quarterbacks today in the draft, but who knows how it's going. Thank you very much for joining us. And JJ, how are you today, sir?
I'm great. I'm great. Little under the weather, feeling better though than I was earlier this week. If as you progress through that sickness, it's always a better feeling. So I'm doing all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And as I referenced here at the top and to you just before we jumped on, I'm going to add it to the stage now. And we are going to spin the pickerwheel.com, not a sponsor of the show. We are going to figure out kind of where we are in terms of our dynasty build because we have, of course, are doing a dynasty rookie mock draft. Look, a lot of people, I'm sure yourself included, will advocate for best player available. We have our takes. Some of us dive heavy into this research, and we see, we have models, of course, like yourself. However, we don't always draft in a vacuum when we draft. So it's important to, I think, try to add a little bit of context and at least talk through whether or not that changes our process in terms of when we're drafting. So I will get your take on that after we spin the wheel. But first, a very important question here. Do you want to spin or do you want to defer?
I'll defer. That's what you're supposed to do, right?
Absolutely. And that is the one that most people choose, which is the best choice, to be fair. So here we are right now. I will go with a win now build. So for myself, when I'm looking at, oh, we got to get the confetti in there. Of course, we try to have a little fun on the show. My consideration here isn't necessarily that I am going to do anything drastically different, but I like to look at guys who I think can come into the league right away and produce. Now, of course, we don't have landing spots yet. We don't have draft capital. But if we see, for example, a Shador drop, and Jackson Dart maybe becomes very close to him, or Milrow is in the first round, right? Depending on where these quarterbacks land, for example, it might be more interesting to take a guy who we think his situation is a little bit better, especially if as prospects they're pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think typically in that kind of environment, I'm probably hypothetically going to lean a little bit more running back heavy than wide receiver heavy, just because we know they can make
Sure.
a more impactful year, have more of an impact year one. But like you said, I think overall, still just kind of getting the best value that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is your turn, sir. So let's spin the wheel and see what we are going to thrust upon you in terms of strategy and its best player available, as it should be. This is pretty much how we like to approach the draft, especially JJ, if you are someone who is heavy into evaluating all these prospects. Yeah.
Yeah. This will be easier on me for sure. Just kind of, without having the context of like what this team really looks like, I can just say, hey, I'm gonna get the guy that I like the most here.
Absolutely. I love that. And I will go ahead and fire this draft up in just a second. But first of all, some pre draft thoughts here. I know you're really involved in these prospects, and right now you are at the 104. Myself, I'm picking at the 112. What are you thinking in terms of the first round? Who are you hoping to get at the 104? Maybe, and has that changed for you throughout your process in the last couple of months here?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting pre versus post draft. That in this, I think this doesn't get enough attention. I did my prospect guide and I launch it and people look at the rankings and they come back and they say, well, if you're saying all these favorable things about the running backs, then why are your rankings saying what they're saying right now? Where
Sure.
there are to most, I would say people see running backs a little bit lower than they would expect based on all the favorable profiles and stuff that I talked through, in the guide about these running backs, but the bottom line is there's only a handful of backs that we can really confidently project right now as day one or day two guys. Whereas there's going to be some players that do fall into day two. Maybe it's Bashal Tutin, maybe it's DJ Giddens. I think Dylan Sampson
Sure.
has pretty good odds to be day two, but we don't know for sure with some of those players. Even Cam Scadaboo, we don't know for sure that he's going to be a day two player. If they are day two, they'll move up in the rankings post draft. If they're not, then they won't move up post draft. So to me, I think post draft is when we're going to see more confidence, if you will, with the running backs, because we know what the
Yeah.
draft capital looks like. Whereas right now, there's a lot of as kind of mediocre, average, maybe slightly above average. I'd say average the wide receiver class looks right now. We know we know a lot of the day two wide receivers that are going to get drafted, and we feel confident in those guys. So
Sure.
draft, I'm going to be more okay and just kind of picking that player.
Love it. And yeah, it's an ever changing and evolving process, especially as you say pre-draft. But certainly we need to make sure that we're conscious of what's going on with the class. Obviously, elite running backs, or at least deep running backs, which is what we're all saying and assuming here. Wide receiver, as you mentioned, is a bit more sketchy. So we need to be careful here, and we don't want to miss in round one of our rookie drafts for sure. So we want to try and take a sure thing if there is such thing. But with that said, JJ, let's get it started here. We will add the draft to the stage. If you are following along and in the draft, we're going to fire it up here. Once again, Superflex, tight end premium, 12 teams, 60 seconds per pick, rookie mock draft, and here we go. So as this fires up, I think we can assume it's going to be Genty here at the 101. Cam Ward probably comes off the board before your pick, JJ. So who are you thinking here with the 104?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that if anyone in the top 3 is listening, they'll probably do the thing that I don't want them to do, but, I'm hoping like, in my opinion, there's been a lot of steam about Amari and Hampton going in the first round, and
Mm,
if you look
yep.
at history, at least the last, like, 15 years, first round running backs have been unbelievably good, in
Yeah.
with their fantasy success. 2/3 of them have given us a 16 plus PPR point per game season over their first 3 years, in one of their first 3 years. And the guys who didn't, like one of them was Josh Jacobs, who eventually got there. One of them was Mark Ingram, who eventually got there. One of them was David Wilson, who had to retire. Rashad Penny. The only two guys who didn't really have an injury reason or did it later in their career who didn't hit that 16 PPR point per game mark were Sony Michel and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, where CEH had prospect concerns, I think more so probably than Sony Michel did, but both of them were end of the first round picks. They weren't
Yeah.
like locked in at 20th overall or anything like that. So I think if Amari and Hampton really like he's been mocked to the Broncos so much. If he does
Mhm.
go to, and there he goes right now, but if
Yeah.
he does go to to Denver, I think he's just a lock. And I mean, right now I have him in his own tier to begin with, but I think that he's just a very, very solid pick with that kind of draft capital.
Yeah, I love that. And I'll let you scroll through and see who you're picking here for a second. We're not sure what's going to happen. We're assuming the Broncos are going to take a running back in first round. We don't know. But of course, whether that's Hampton, whether that's Henderson, pick your Sean Payton Joker flavor here, I guess.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you mentioned Clyde Edwards-Helaire, like you said, he was a very back, he wasn't even expected to get that first round capital. That was shocking for many people. The on the day that it happened. So yeah, I think it's pretty interesting point of note here for us fantasy drafters that some of these guys we have are. It's important to have your sense of these players before the draft, and draft capital is a big piece, but it's just one piece of the overall puzzle.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Awesome. So we started out with Ash and Genty. We had Amarian Hampton at the 102, Cam Ward at the 103, and you went with Tet McMillan. What are you thinking about T Mac here? Is he your far and away wide receiver one? Do we still have dreams of Luther Burden? What are we doing at the 104?
Yeah, the prospect model, my prospect model, the ZAP model loves Luther Burden. It doesn't get enough context for how Burden kind of compiled his numbers. I look at a metric called breakout score that I created that adjusts receiving yards per team pass attempt at wide receiver for both age and strength of opponent. And Luther Burden's
Yeah,
breakout score, it's a really predictive metric. It's just as predictive actually standalone as draft capital is. So
yeah,
it's a predictive metric. And Luther Burden's is 96.3, which is the best in the class. And usually, first round wide receivers, the average over the last or since 2011 has been around 90, so he's above that average. And Tet McMillan, who I picked here with that 104, his breakout score is at 83.5, so it's below sort of the norm that we typically see good first round wide receivers hit. I do have some concerns about Tet from that perspective, but I do think when we're looking at and projecting and forecasting how this NFL draft might go down, Luther Burden's been falling out of the first round in a lot of mocks. I think he's probably going to be a second round pick at this point, maybe
yeah,
late first rounder. And there are a lot of projection and forecasting concerns for Burden. If you look at his usage and how Missouri deployed him, it really was like a Wandale Robinson situation. Like he was a lot of screens, a lot of close, low A dot type looks. He's really good after the catch. I don't think he's quite Wandale Robinson because he's bigger and I think he's better. He's got better ball skills. He can track the ball down the field. But I do think that there's risk involved in that. I think, one of the comps that I like with Burden is Brandon Ayuk, where, we see
mm,
what Ayuk is now, but coming out, Ayuk was sort of this like yak monster who had question marks about his man to man and route running. And I think we have similar question marks with Luther Burden. So I do think the range of outcomes is there for Burden to really hit and have a high ceiling. But Tet right now seems like he's going to be a first round pick. He had 2 solid seasons in college. I have some concerns about the strength of competition that he faced when he was at Arizona,
hmm
but and I do have some concerns about his ability to separate. Those are concerns that people had with some other, like a QJ type or some of these other bigger
yep,
bodied guys. Now, Drake London also had those concerns and that's worked out. I just don't think Tet is as good of a prospect as a guy like London, who he gets comped to a lot. I think he's more like a Cortland Sutton type, which is okay,
Yeah.
especially in the right environment. But I think there is a little bit of downside that is, I think more and more people are talking about that downside, but it's why Tet to me is my wide receiver one, but not locked in as the no matter what, like clear and obvious choice of wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, which is why in the past few drafts he fell a little bit here, but we've seen Travis Hunter go in that 104 slot, which is why presently I prefer a Trevion Henderson, who
Yep.
is my RB3 in that 104 spot. You could maybe talk me into a Tyler Warren over Tet. Sometimes he even falls to the 107 behind all of those guys, which I think is interesting. We had David Gautieri on the show a couple of days ago on Saturday, and he was talking about the fact that it's Genty, and then 102 through 107, pick your flavor, pick
Yeah.
your poison. It kind of almost doesn't matter at this stage, but again, we don't have that draft capital just yet. If you look at the entire first round, let's go through. So Ted at the 104 for you, Trey Henderson 105. We got Tyler Warren at the 106, Burden 107, Travis Hunter 108, Emeka Egbuka 109. We have Jackson Dart at the 110 before Shador Sanders. I love it from Tom. I don't always love Tom's QB choices, but I love that one. We'll have to talk about that. Colston Loveland at the 111 in tight end premium, and Quinshawn Judkins here at the 112. How do you feel about this, the back end of this first round, JJ? What do you see here that piques your interest?
Yeah, I mean the Jackson Dart pick is definitely ballsy, a little bold. Not that I think that he's a horrible prospect. I don't have a quarterback model, but obviously I
Mhm.
research and I talked to a good friend of mine, Jim Sonis, on the show, who has a quarterback
Yep.
model himself, and it's been a pretty successful model historically. He loves Cam Ward, but he also loves Jackson Dart. I mean, those two to him are the two obvious kind of go-tos in this class. Now I'm up on the clock.
Yeah.
I Jalen Milrose next on the ADP list, and I'm not against kind of just throw because to me, Caleb Johnson was the last three that went are clearly part of that like tier that I would
Yeah.
feel most comfortable with. I could dig deeper and go with like a Isaiah Bond or Trey Harris or a Cam Scadaboo or
Yeah.
there's another player that I'm considering reaching, but I'll probably hold. I might just go with Jalen Milroe here and it's a risk, right? But there's a lot
Yeah.
of there's again, my quarterback evaluation is not as strong as the running back and wide receiver and tight end stuff, just because I'm modeling those other things, and I'm with the running backs and wide receivers, I'm writing up profiles and such with them. But when you're talking about tier breaks in the second round capital is not it's not nothing, but it's obviously not first round capital in a rookie draft.
Yeah.
And the upside is just immense for Milroe. And there's a lot of steam right now with him going to the draft and being there,
Yeah.
like presently physically there, which we don't typically see with guys who are going to be like definite day two picks. I think there's going to be some
Sure.
team, like there could be some teams that are interested enough. And the other if he does get any sort of opportunity as a rookie, like even if it's second half of the season, that's the kind of asset that's going to maintain value from year one to year
Yes.
two, that I can see what he looks like. I can look at the numbers and such afterwards, and then kind of make my decision after year one. I don't know if this is like a Hendon Hooker type situation or something like
Hope not.
yeah, maybe it goes that way. But at this moment, if there wasn't that teardrop, Jalen Knoll was the other one that I was thinking about taking.
Yeah.
But if there wasn't that teardrop, I would easily have gone Caleb Johnson. I just think there was an obvious drop basically after Johnson went.
Yeah, hard to argue that, and especially in a super flex league. Like you're saying, these guys are going to retain their value as long as they don't completely fall off a cliff in year one and do some sort of even Anthony Richardson, like a
Dude, dude,
undesirable
Kenny Pickett.
situation.
The fact that Kenny Pickett
Yeah,
maintained value from year one to year
yeah,
two, and Zach
yeah,
Wilson maintained value. Like
yeah, he did.
all you need is even an opening for a quarterback competition going into year two for that value to still hold. And the nice part is
Yeah,
with this kind of player, Justin Fields is the same way, where you question the passing a little bit. You don't know exactly what you're going to get from that perspective. But we
Sure.
know that from a fantasy perspective, he's going to produce. And so people will buy into that, not necessarily thinking about like the long-term value. Fields, it's kind of worked out because he's bounced around and gotten some,
Yep.
he's going to start this year, obviously. You're kind of just hoping with that with Milrow. But I fully recognize that, it could go in like, I mean, this could be a 0 type pick, at 204.
Sure. Yeah, but Fields is kind of a good segue into the fact that we have two distinct camps here of quarterback. At the top, we have the guys who run and the guys who don't. And obviously, for fantasy, we like the guys who run. Jalen Milrow, we're probably not surprised that he ran for 41.5 yards per game in his college career. Jackson Dart, 34.2 yards per game and 38.4 at Ole Miss exclusively. So that's really interesting there. Cam Ward, 10.7. Shador, -5 yards per game. So those guys are not giving us the extra on the ground that we really need. But Milrow and Dart, if they hit, if they can maintain, if they can just stay on the field, right, and play, those guys are going to be QB2s with QB1 upside weekly, assuming they can be an average thrower of the football.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, look, the 104 and I chose 104 because it's just a difficult spot to be in my opinion, because you get in Superflex you get two obvious tier breaks. Because I think Hampton is in his own tier, and then I think
Yep.
Cam Ward is in his own tier at quarterback and slash in Hampton's tier, and then there's that drop, and then oftentimes you get this kind of situation where you're just kind of choosing between guys like some of the guys that are being drafted right after where Milrow went, they might not even be day 2 picks at the end of the day. And if that's the case, then you're gonna not love that result, post draft.
Yeah, totally agree with you. And I'm going to make my pick here. I think he's still on the board. No, he was taken. I need to figure out who I'm picking here at the 212. We got some tight ends here. We got Ayomanor, but I think I'm just going to recap it. And Ollie Gordon has fallen precipitously. We're going to go with Damian Martinez, and we will talk about the second round here. So at the 201, we have Matthew Golden, Shedeur Sanders, Caleb Johnson, Jalen Milrow, who we've just been discussing, Dylan Sampson, who I absolutely love his inside running game. If the guy can catch a football, he proved he can at least catch a football at the combine. Can he do it consistently and fluidly? I don't know. But then we have Jalen Knoll at the 206, Trey Harris, Cam Scatterbo, Jalen Royals, who people seem to have mixed feelings about. Devin Neal, RJ Harvey, who I absolutely love, sniped for me. And then Damian Martinez, Jaden Higgins. The ADP still isn't up there. Jaden Higgins would have been a nice pick for me at the 212.
Yeah.
How are you feeling here, JJ, about the second round?
Yeah, the Jaden Higgins thing, I was like, man, he is far down this list that I didn't even
Yeah,
realize he was that
he
far
is.
down the list. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Jalen Royals is kind of interesting. He got a comp in my prospect guide of Rashee Rice. He's but the model didn't love Rice, to be clear. So it doesn't like love Royals because there's smaller school stuff going on from a production standpoint, all that.
Sure.
I don't mind him though. It's just like this is a sort of choose your own adventure range in the draft, especially right now where we don't know the draft capital side. Like right now, I could go in a ton of different directions. I'm probably, I might, since I went a little bit wild with the Milrow pick, I might not take Isaiah Bond here because he has the off the field stuff, and I don't know
Sure.
how that might affect his draft capital at the end of the day. I think he'd be a great fit for like Buffalo or something if he ends up, going there.
Mm,
With this being tight end premium, part of me wants to go Terrence Ferguson because I think that he, at least has the athleticism. I'm gonna go though. I'm gonna go Jack Besh here because I
I
think
love it.
that I think the NFL is gonna like him a lot more than the fantasy community does. He
Yeah.
played kind of like that weird tight end role at LSU his freshman year where he outperformed like Malik Neighbors and had this like crazy production profile as a freshman. His production profile is, he has like a breakout score that's pretty average, pretty mid. But a lot of film folks like what they see from a route running perspective. He's got a big body. He should be able to play at least like a possession type role. And like I said, like I think he's going to be pretty easily a top 100 pick in this draft after what he did at the Senior Bowl.
Sure.
And if that happens, you're
Yeah.
getting him, a top 100 wide receiver, a day 2 wide receiver in round 3. I think Manor makes sense right next to him. Could have gone Bayshal
Mhm.
Tootin there. which, there's another running back in DJ Giddens that I
Yep.
considered. I'm a big Giddens guy because but again, I think Besh is a safe option. Probably never going to be a wide receiver 1 in the league. Maybe we get a random wide receiver 2 type season from him. But after going Milrow, I kind of wanted some more stability, with that next pick. But again, this is like going back to what we talked about at the start of the show. It's like in post draft rookie drafts, I'm almost definitely going to be going running backs heavy, right? Running back heavy, like running back in round 2, running back in round 3. We just don't know who those guys necessarily are going to be right now, which is why I'm leaning more for those top 100, day 2 wide receivers.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. We're officially in the part of the offseason pre-draft here where people are getting bored and they're questioning every single take. Jack Best dominated the Senior Bowl and he was the belle of the ball there for a week or two. And even on social media, I saw a clip of Jack Best stepping in front of Malik Labers and making a catch.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, look, he's better than Malik. Obviously that's not the case, but I think the pendulum has swung a little bit too far in the other direction here. And, in the middle of the third round, I don't think that's a bad call at all. Let's have a look here in the third. Jaden Higgins, Mason Taylor. We're going to have to talk about these tight ends here in a second. Alec Amanor, Jack Besh, of course, Elijah Arroyo, Bashal Tootin, Terrence Ferguson, Harold Fannin. Tight end 3, JJ. Gun to your head, who's it going to be?
Probably, probably Fannin right now. But I don't feel super strong about that. I think that there's a chance that he falls in the draft more than we would like. And that's gonna hurt his score, at least in my model. Like I said, I think Terrence Ferguson is the one who that's not the top 2, that profiles the most of being like a game-breaking fantasy tight end. Like the standard size that we want and speed that we want from a tight end. The athleticism is there. Production profile is lacking a little bit, but it could be worse. And so he's the one that I think would be the best value. But because I've seen Ferguson fall more than this, and I've seen Fannin go like there are Fannin truthers out there, that because his yards per route run profile is out of control, and what he did at Bowling Green. But yeah, I don't know. I don't have a really, really strong answer. I think that there could be a situation where Ferguson is my tight end 3 post draft.
Yeah. I get that, especially considering what he was able to put together at the combine. Harold Fannin, we didn't like the 40 he ran, but everything else was good, right? So, and the production was absolutely insane. So hard to argue that. Mason Taylor, the son of an elite athlete, there, of course, and Jason Taylor, Hall of Famer as well. So he's got the genes that we want, and then Elijah Arroyo, of course. So you can take a look at what's going on here in the third round, and everyone is sniping me from my running back picks. Tyler Shough is the 311. I don't hate it. Is this Taysom Hill 2.0? Probably not. But what do you think of Tyler Shough and what he might be able to do in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, look, after talking to Jim Sonis on my show, it seems like the probability that he ends up panning out is extremely, extremely low, just based on the efficiency / age profile that he has. So I'm probably going to be more out than in. But if he does find an interesting spot like that where they can use him in fun ways, maybe I'll change my tune a little bit.
Yeah, he's a tough one for sure, and a bit older. I'm going to ask you some questions about age as we wrap up here, but we'll wait till the draft finishes. Brashard Smith, DJ Giddens, and Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon has fallen so far. I almost didn't pick him here in favor of Taj Brooks. Instead, I went Ollie Gordon just because of the fall. Gordon, if he can, I don't know, late round 3, if he can get late round 3 draft capital, which is possible depending on how early some of these running backs go and who's left on the board. Should we be valuing Ollie Gordon a little bit higher than 312 right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a bad call. If I look at the comps from my model, he's looking at like James Conner, Ramondre Stevenson, Buck Allen, that sort of archetype where I don't know if the pass catching is going to be elite from him. Like Ramondre Stevenson is always like a go-to comp for some of these bigger guys. And some folks like will push back and be like, well, Ramondre Stevenson is a much more of a pass catcher. I think that's not necessarily by choice, the way that things have gone down with Stevenson and how they've deployed him. And so, and James Conner is at least a decent to plus pass catcher. Look, all right, I'm on the clock right now. I'm just gonna do it and not even take a running back in this loaded class in this draft. I'm
Love
just
it.
gonna take Isaiah Bond right now. Um, he to me is going to be more than likely a day two pick. Is it going to be this year's Jermaine Burton? Possibly. But I think the Bond hate has gone too far here to get him at 404. It's a little bit too far.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about Bond. What do you see that you like? Because a lot of us are unsure to the point where sometimes he's not even drafted in these mocks, JJ.
Yeah, which is crazy to me. Like only because I think that the fantasy community will often like I don't want to say take lock, but there's a lot of groupthink that goes around where we see Bond, say that he's going to break the 40 record, goes out, he still runs a fast 40. I mean, it was still not a bad 40. It just wasn't the record. And then Matthew Golden, I think if
Yeah.
Golden wouldn't have done that, I also wonder what the narrative would be around Bond, right?
Mm,
But
yeah.
I think that once someone gets turned off and someone else gets turned off by Bond, it kind of snowballs a little bit. And when we're talking about like fourth round guys, I mean, like I like Rocket Sanders a lot. I like Taj
Yeah.
Brooks is a decent prospect too.
Hmm.
Like these players, I don't mind. But when we're talking about Isaiah Bond, who is from a mock draft perspective right now projected to go day two pretty strongly on day two. I'm willing to throw that dart. If you can get a fourth round rookie pick who I don't care what's going on off the field, who was drafted day two, and he's
Hmm.
from a talent perspective, he's a vertical threat. He does have a lot of speed. There's always these like clips of like check out Matthew Golden. McShay sent a tweet out that was like check out Matthew Golden. He moves like no one else on a football field. And meanwhile, you see
Yeah.
Isaiah Bond moving exactly like Matthew Golden on a football field in the exact same clip as he's breaking down Golden because like he can get downfield. A lot of people have comped him to Jalen Waddle. I think that's a little bit too much just because his production
Yeah.
profile wasn't nearly as strong. But his breakout score in my model was not bad. It was like 77. And that's because if you look at what he did as a sophomore at a good program in Alabama, it wasn't horrible. Like he had a yards per team pass attempt that was over 2. You adjust that for age
Mhm.
and for the program strength and strength of schedule. His production profile, strictly production profile, is better than Matthew Golden's. Like his career production profile. Now, I think Golden will look better in my model, and he's the one that I prefer. There's no doubt. But to see a gap of Golden at the 201, which Golden goes in the first round, will go in the first round plenty. To getting a fourth rounder in Isaiah Bond when I don't think the gap is nearly that significant in value. But I do worry, of course, about some of the off the field stuff and him again being this year's Jermaine Burton.
Yeah, I totally hear that. And one thing we need to consider because he was taken in this draft is the Quinn Ewers effect. I happen to think Quinn Ewers is, look, we don't want to talk bad about people, but from a quarterback perspective, let's be nice and say he's not ready yet. He's not
Yeah,
polished.
yeah,
And so when you're watching the tape last year with Xavier Worthy and all these sky balls and the fact that he struggled this year, I thought at the, people thought it was a good workout for him at the combine. It looked like he struggled. I know the new receivers that the quarterbacks are throwing to right away, but he's still sailing balls. He's struggling with accuracy, and so I think we have to bake a little bit of that in to the profiles of these Texas wide
yeah.
receivers. And if you can get one of them, like you're mentioning Bond with his production profile in the fourth, why not? Let's take a look at this fourth round, and then we'll talk about the draft as a whole. We had Raheem Sanders at the 401, Will Howard at the 402, Taj Brooks, Isaiah Bond, Trevor Etienne at the 405. Really good value there. Probably should have taken him over Ali Gordon. Xavier Restrep-slo at the 406, Torrey Horton, who continues to be drafted in the fourth round. He used to be completely off the board. Now he's consistently in the fourth. May, depending on where he lands, go in the late third. We'll see. Kyle Williams, who is Chris Sims' family member apparently, because he's his wide
Oh yeah,
receiver too in the class. We got Ty Felton at the 409, Quinn Ewers at the 410, Jaden Blue and Tez Johnson for myself. Real quick, Tez Johnson, yeah, he's probably off my board, but at the 412, the last possible pick, why not just take a guy who's been productive enough in college and see if he can do it? And that he's small, he's got his own, set of warts. At the same time, why not give him a shot as compared to maybe a LaQuint Allen or one of these other running backs, especially when I have three of them. So, JJ, how do you feel about this draft overall? Let's start with your team that you were able to draft. If you're looking at this post draft, and figuring out how you're going to integrate these guys into your team, do you feel good? Do you feel like you missed out on value? What does it look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't love it. Just because the 104 I think is a tough spot. I wish that
Sure.
I think Tet is in a similar tier as a Burden or Hunter or even Egbuka, you could argue. So like there's a lot more
Yeah.
value in the 109 there than the 104. And then as we talked about the second round, there's a giant grouping there where you can make an argument for a
Yeah.
lot of guys over a guy like Milrow. I just went with Milrow because I think the upside is crazy where we could see him as a top 5 asset in dynasty if, he does get a starting gig. Basically, that's what we
Yeah.
would need to happen. And then, the third with Jack Besh, I'm not like overly high on him. I think that I probably in hindsight should have just gone with Bashal Tutin, who I think
Sure.
does have a decent chance to be day 2 after that 40 that he ran at the combine. So maybe just throw in Tutin there instead of Besh. And then I mean, we talked about Isaiah
Yeah.
Bond. I think Bond in round 4 is wild value at the end of the day. And I know that it's not an uncommon thing. I just am shocked that we see it and that he's been buried as much as he has. I understand all the off the field stuff. I get all of that, but we're talking about a guy who played at 2 monster programs, didn't really get it going last year. I totally understand that, but had a like from a production standpoint, an analytical standpoint, like we're always worried mostly about, I shouldn't say we're mostly worried about how these guys performed early on in their careers from an age adjusted production standpoint, how they did as sophomores in particular. And he had a decent sophomore season, within a really big program, tough opponents, all that kind of stuff. He has the
Yeah.
verticality that we know there's a trait that he has that a team will be able to deploy in some way. So I just think there's a lot to like about Bond at that value. Second round in a super flex, tight end premium, probably not going Bond's way. But I think you can start to think about him in the
Right.
third. Like that's realistic
Yeah.
because I do think he's going to be a top 100 pick unless some of that off the field stuff does come into play.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And for all of his talking about breaking the record, no, he didn't break the 40-time record. Still ran a 4.39. So, like,
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's fast, right? And the Quinn Ewers effect, like I mentioned, I think we just need to take all this in consideration. He's a supreme value there in the late fourth. My draft, I really just took the falling value, I think, at running back. Quinshawn Judkins, Damian Martinez, Ollie Gordon's first time I've walked away with 3 running backs in a draft here from the 12 spot. I don't hate it. And Tez Johnson, as opposed to another shot on running back, yeah, I could have went LaQuint Allen, Woody Marks, who I think was still on the board. One of these freakier guys who can catch the football. But instead, we go Tez, and we just hope he finds a place and a way here. But I do want to talk to you, JJ, about the second round here. If you take a look at those running backs in the second round, who do you like the most? Because I'm a big Samson guy, but I do also like RJ Harvey. It really depends, like you're referencing with the Ollie Gordon discussion about can these guys find a role where they can catch the football and can they do it well? Can they also be on the field to pass protect well enough in order to catch the football enough? So, how do you feel about these second round and even maybe some of these third round running backs here?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a situation where you need to choose the kind of risk profile that you feel most comfortable with. And what I mean by that is like you took Damian Martinez. I think Martinez is a pretty
Mhm.
safe option. Like I think he's gonna
Yes.
find like he could find a place where he can get early down work. He's gonna be one of the better, between the tackles, rushers in this class, more than likely.
Mhm.
But the question I think is how much receiving work is he gonna get, right? And so like like to me, there's a Damian Martinez where the range of outcomes is narrow, whereas there's a DJ Giddens type who, or obviously he didn't go in that round, but there's or even a Cam Scadaboo type where I think that the range of outcomes might
Mhm.
be a little bit wider because the pass catching profiles are there a little bit more, and the juice might be a little
Yep.
bit there, a little bit more for a guy like Giddens, not Cam Scadaboo, of course. Then like I don't mind RJ Harvey. I think Harvey, his top comp in the ZAP model is Chase Brown. So, obviously, he's got the explosiveness that we like to see. A little bit undersized, but not, nothing that would scare me away. It's not like he's a Brashard Smith in terms of like getting a big workload, or Jaden Blue or something like that at the next level. So I like Harvey. Devin Neal is really interesting to me because
Yeah.
he comped to Shane Vereen in the model. And I think it makes a lot of
Okay.
sense because he's really good as a receiver, right? And he can play, he could hypothetically be a 3-down back, but he's not super explosive. And I don't know if a team, because teams are going to want to use more explosive players that can get like do a lot in space, on pass catching downs and receiving downs. And I don't know if there's going to be a team that is going to want to deploy Devin Neal in that fashion. And I don't know if he differentiates himself enough on the ground versus some of the other, like a Damian Martinez, for instance. So I think he needs
Yeah.
to find a very specific spot that really understands and likes his skill set. And that scares me a little bit with Neal. I think he's good though. Like I think that he could be effective in the NFL. I just think he's going to be more landing spot dependent than some of the other guys.
Yeah, and you're referencing to that explosiveness, and maybe the lack of explosiveness
Yeah.
from some of these guys like Devin Neal. Do you tend to err on the side of explosive because you want like the guy who pops like a Devon Achan, or are you comfortable enough saying, okay, maybe he can be David Montgomery, and just get the rock 20-25 times a game, and that's enough for me in my RB2 slot.
Yeah, as long as they have other traits, like I always think about running back prospecting. Like if you want to keep it really simple, and the way that I think about it is,
Yeah.
are you big enough, fast enough, and can you catch passes? Like that's really like a very simplistic way to think about it. But if one area is deficient, then the other areas should be strong, right? So for instance, like Jameer Gibbs wasn't the biggest back in the world, but he has the best breakout score in the database because his receiving numbers were
Yeah.
so strong. And then obviously he was also explosive. So that's more than making up for the lack of, frame, if you will, coming out because he was, like 199, 200 pounds. Cam Scadaboo doesn't have the explosiveness. And I have plenty of concerns about that. Like if you look at day 2 picks, if he does go day 2, if you look at day 2 picks who had explosive play rates that were as low as Scadaboo's, you really get like AJ Dillon and Blake Corum over the last 10 years or so. And so like there's some worry there, but at the same time, his closest comp for me in the model was Kareem Hunt, who is also a question mark from a speed perspective, but had a really well-rounded profile, which I think Cam Scadaboo has. Like again, he's making up for the lack of explosiveness with his receiving, and it is his. I mean, he probably has the second best production profile in this class behind Ashton Genty, right? And then like Dylan Sampson
Mhm.
doesn't have the receiving profile, maybe question marks
Right.
about his size, but the dude is explosive and he has the best explosive run rate in this
Yes.
class. So like to me, it's all these pieces that you're just trying to put together. And when players don't check any of the boxes, I get a little bit nervous. And when they check all of the boxes, then I'm like, okay, like that's why I think like a Bashaw Tootin and a DJ Giddens, I'm going to be more willing to throw those darts only because like I
Right.
recognize the downside. The downside is evident, but the upside is also pretty crazy, I think, for that kind of player.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And the NFL will tell us, as we always say, right, with draft capital, exactly what we should think of these guys. And I think, mid to late second round is where we'll see the extreme shuffling of these
Yeah.
guys based on where they land here in this rookie draft. Question for you, because we have a little bit of it in the chat. Restrep-slo. We got his 40 time. We got Restrep. No. What do we do with Xavier Restrepo here? What are you thinking in terms of? Yeah, he was injured, but then I think he deleted the tweet that that said he was
Yeah.
injured, and he didn't have proof, and it's soft tissue. Do we trust this guy?
The thing is that regardless of how fast he would have run, I was probably gonna be a little bit lower on Restrepo than the market. He doesn't have the best age adjusted production. He's obviously going to be a slot at the next level and doesn't have that much
Yep.
more to bring to the table. Aside from that, and I think at this point, because of that 40, I'm going to be shocked if he does go day 2. And that's, it's funny. Like I don't look at athleticism measurables and combine testing for the wide receiver model. The only thing that I look at running back is 40 time to get speed score. So weight adjusted 40 time. And I don't do anything at wide receiver. I just want to see how tall they are and how much they weigh. That's the only thing I care about.
Sure.
But I do care more subjectively because it's going to impact their draft capital. And that's one of the inputs that does go into the model. And like Matthew Golden, for instance, him running as fast as he did, he'd probably be a second round pick if not for that 40. But because he did that,
Yeah.
teams fall in love with that kind of thing. And now he's going to be like, if you look at NFL mock draft database and Matthew Golden from December, he was like a 5th round pick for in mock draft.
Sure.
Now he's a mid first rounder. And you can say, okay, we learned more about him in December and January because Texas did their thing and he was more involved. But at the same time, you can't tell me that the 40 time is doing nothing there. Just as the 40 time will do something more than likely to Xavier Restrep-slo. We haven't seen a wide receiver come back from that kind of speed. I know that it matters less, and we can explain that away that he's more quick than fast, if you will. He's more agile, but I still, have my concerns aside from all that. Like if I liked him, like this is a good example is like I remember David Bell when he came out, where out of
Yep.
Purdue, where I liked his production profile a lot. Like I thought David Bell was actually a good prospect, and then he ran a slow 40, and that he was still a day 2 pick though. But I at least had something that I liked before that slow 40 happening that I still was okay with drafting Bell in like the second in rookie drafts, which was a mistake. But Restrepo, I think
Yeah.
this is going to like I didn't like him enough going into the combine or pro day or what have you that now if he's going to be day 3, I'm just more than likely going to be out.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It's a nice segue to one of my last questions here, and it was something. It was really how we connected initially on Reddit with this study of late round draft picks and how they connect in fantasy. Basically, what you learned and I learned doing kind of separate studies. Of course, yours way more in depth. Was basically the fact that these guys don't hit for fantasy. There's a lot of outliers. It's something like 2% who are going to be very useful on your fantasy team. It's close to 5, 6, 7% of guys who will actually be able to hold down a dynasty roster spot for you and be somewhat usable for you over multiple seasons. It's really difficult. So, I mean, you referenced it earlier. If a guy's taken day 2 and he's still available in the 4th round of your rookie drafts, you're way better off taking him than say taking a guy in day 3. Having now a week or even a little bit more being removed from that study of yours, do you still have the same thoughts about these day 3 guys? Are they more or less completely off your board because it's just a crapshoot out there? Or, have you had time to reflect and maybe think a little bit more about
I think the most interesting thing that I found with that like research was I looked at Dynasty League Football's ADP, rookie draft ADP, and I analyzed
it? Mhm.
how we look at day 3 picks through that lens and not just in sequential order of when they were drafted day 3. So what I really wanted to see was, is there any correlation between a day 3 running back or wide receiver? So I separated it out. So let's just look at running backs, right? You get day 3 running backs, you throw them in a rookie draft, and you look at their rookie draft ADP, and then you look at how they performed across their first 3 years of their career. Now, hypothetically, you would hope for some correlation because that would mean that we are okay or decent at spotting which day 3 running backs will hit. Like, for instance, last year, if Bucky Irving were the go-to day 3 running back that everyone was taking in round 2 of rookie drafts, right? Then there would be more correlation and there would be more validity to this idea that we would be good at spotting who that day 3 player is. It's not that day 3 players will never emerge. It's that not only will they rarely emerge, but we're not even good as a market. And I think that like, someone like you or others who are really analyzing the classes can be better than consensus at spotting, which players are good or which players aren't good and stuff, right? But
Sure.
that edge is only going to take you so far, right? Like it's still largely going to be a crapshoot when it comes to these day 3 guys. Zero correlation between day 3 running backs, where they were drafted in rookie drafts versus how well they performed in their NFL career. Because you get guys like Kyron Williams, who was a 4th round pick, Isaiah Pacheco, who was a 4th round pick. You get these players that, you might have been on, like some people might have been on. And again, like I feel good about my track record. I missed on Bucky from a dynasty perspective last year. Fortunately, I was in on him in redraft, but I missed on him in dynasty last year. But there's been situations like where I was really in on Pacheco and stuff, and was able to pinpoint him. And there's some players that I'm gonna like in this class and still elevate them, over other day three. Yeah, Kamani Vidal is another great example of that,
Yeah.
where like the market, understandably, like I get it, like we're gonna want to push these guys up the board because of situation and stuff. And I'm fine. Like if you're spending a fourth round pick, it's fine. It's not a big deal. Like it doesn't matter
Right.
enough. But there is a lot, like the hit rates are a lot better. This is more so a wide receiver now, but the hit rates are so much better when you can get a day 2 wide receiver in round 3 or round 4 of your rookie drafts compared to a day 3 wide receiver in round 3 or round 4, regardless of the talent profile, regardless of all of that. We even Jalen McMillan last year, like he was a third round super flex pick, or he was a third round single quarterback pick. And we saw his value get better year over year. And he did what he did towards the end of the season. But he was not, it wasn't, when we're looking at these rookie picks in ADP, it's not so sequential versus how draft capital is viewing them. We're not just picking them off the draft board, the NFL draft board, and saying, okay, you were the first running back taken. That means you're the first running back taken. Like there's analysis that goes on. And unfortunately, from a consensus standpoint, we're kind of bad at it when you get into day 3. It's just kind of a crapshoot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And all of my Rasheen Ali shares at the
Yes.
expense of having Tyrone Tracy shares
Yeah, there you go.
are just,
Right, right.
the constant reminder of that point. Really quick on Jalen Milroe. I know you're not necessarily the quarterback guy, but we're hearing today that the Steelers are setting up a meeting with Jalen Milroe. Like you said, he's being invited here to the NFL draft. We saw Jackson Dart taken second off the board here at the expense of Sanders. How do you think this all shakes out just in terms of first round quarterbacks who are drafted? Do we get 4? Do we get 3? Is it Milroe? Is it Dart? Does Sanders fall? What happens here?
I think that we're going to see Cam Ward go 1, and then a little bit of fall of Sanders, whether it's the Saints that get him or if a team trades up to get Sanders. I have a hard time believing Sanders is going to fall to the 20s. Like I have a hard time thinking the Steelers are just going to be able to get Sanders because there's so much of like an aura around him that kind of thing just seems to never really happen in that way. I think that Jackson Dart will probably be a first round pick, and then I would say more than not, Jalen Milroe will not be a first round pick. But the Steelers are interesting because obviously there's a need, and they have an interestingly and kind of weird offense with Arthur Smith there, and the way that they'll probably want to lean more run, lean more tight end heavy, and that lends itself to more of a mobile and rushing quarterback, which you can get with Jackson Dart. But obviously Jalen Milroe is like taking that to the next level. And the Steelers also took Kenny Pickett just a handful of years ago in the first round when most people did not have a first round grade on him. I think that Pittsburgh is willing to do things that are unconventional at this point to try to find their guy. And honestly, if they do get Rodgers, Milroe being probably one of the bigger projects, if you will, Jackson Dart kind of too, but Milroe being one of the bigger projects in the class, like that combination of Rodgers for a year or two and then letting Milroe kind of take over, it's not that hard to see happening. But I do think that there's a better chance than not that Milroe would fall to round 2.
So are you thinking 3 at this point in terms of quarterbacks in round 1?
Yeah, I'd say 3 at this point. Yeah.
I think that's fair. And look, maybe you get somebody if all 3 are gone by Steelers, by Pittsburgh at 21. Maybe you get somebody who trades back into the first just to get that control, that 5th-year option. We've seen that time and time again, especially with a quarterback who they might like. That's possible. But if one of these guys falls to round 2, it could be an excellent value. JJ, my last question for you here is just if you take a look at the board, I'll give you a second. So I will go first while you look and just tell us which draft or 2 outside of yours or mine that you really liked in terms of the value that people picked up here. I'm going to have to go with my guy at the 111. Of course, Kev, he got Colston Loveland at the 111 and tight end premium. I love that value anywhere from really the 110. I'm happy with Loveland. RJ Harvey at the 211 falling. We see him in the mid to late second round lately. So I like that value. Tyler Shook, I'm not sold on him, but certainly if he's the guy that we were all talking about in, late February, early March, and he gets a chance in an NFL squad, it could be interesting. And then Jaden Blue at the 411. I liked his draft a lot. I'm also going to go, well, I won't steal your thunder here. Who do you like on the board outside of those squads?
I was thinking about, can I say two? Is that all right?
Yeah, of course. Safe,
Okay.
safe four.
All right. I'll go with two. The safer one to go with would be the 101 spot. Genty, obviously, obvious pick.
Yeah,
Matthew Golden getting a probably mid first rounder at 201.
sure.
Pretty strong, even though I'm not like super high on his production profile. Jaden Higgins fell. Like Jaden
Yeah,
Higgins low key might be an end of the first round wide receiver. Like it could be like a Keon Coleman type situation where it's like kind of fringe,
sure.
like a lot of talk that he might go in that range. And then or like even Liget last year, he ended up going in round one. So Higgins, I think, is a good pick. And then I really like Rocket Sanders as a dart, like a day 3 dart throw. If
Yeah,
you go back to what I was talking about earlier, big, fast catches passes. Okay. Like he can do those things. I feel like if he, were in last year's draft class, he would be getting a little bit more love than he is right now. He's just kind of an afterthought because the class is so strong. And the other draft that was kind of interesting to me was 106, where Tyler
yeah,
Warren, I think, is a fine pick in tight end premium there. I thought about going Warren at 104. Jalen
yeah.
Knoll, I thought about going Knoll at 204. Probably, in hindsight, might even prefer that at this point. Bayshall Tootin, I talked about. Should have gone Tootin instead of Jack Besh. And then, I don't love the Restrepo pick, but it's a fourth rounder, so I'll give that pick a little bit of grace.
I love that. And just quickly looking at the 107, your guy, Luther Burden, Trey Harris, big bodies. Talk about guys who could go in the first round, but
Yeah.
probably most likely in the second. You got Terrence Ferguson, who's a big athletic freak. That's what we like to see at tight end. And Torrey Horton, you have concerns maybe about the level of competition, but he seemed to look good. I really like that draft as well, especially when you're not getting a running back. I do not mind that draft either. So we're going to end it on that. So JJ, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get out, I'm just going to do a little bit of business here and tell you that number one, we have a Discord. It's free to join. The link is actually in this YouTube chat. So please feel free to join us up at the Fantasy Football Universe. We're talking ball. We're dropping our content, which comes out daily from multiple channels. And we're just trying to build this thing. So we appreciate you joining us. And if you want to just talk ball for free, and get access to our content before anything else and get in on these mock drafts, you can do that. And of course, you see our April schedule here. We just had JJ, of course. Tom Pasquarello will come on next week. Andrew Erickson from Fantasy Pros, and then the FFU team to wrap everything up with a bow as soon as the NFL draft concludes to give you our rookie mock draft. So thank you so much for joining us, JJ. Of course, everyone here knows where to find you, who you are, all the great content that you put out, but go ahead and plug yourself for the one person who came out of Plato's cave and can't see clearly what's happening here. Who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, man. I really appreciate you having me. That was a lot of fun. Find me on Twitter and most socials at Late Round QB. You can check out lateround.com. I'm selling the prospect guide right now. It's 160 pages of some of the nerdiest stuff you will lay your eyes on, but we're all nerds.
Love it.
If you're watching this, listening to this right now, you're a nerd. So I think that you will enjoy the Late Round prospect guide, but that's all available over on lateround.com.
Love it. And of course, JJ is one of the best of the business. You will not find someone who dives deeper into these rookies to just get you all of the information that you need headed into your rookie draft. There are certainly people who do dive deeper, but I would argue that those people are maybe focused on guys who are going to be maybe potentially UDFAs. So certainly we want to know the guys we want to draft who will contribute to fantasy football teams. And of course, JJ, you have it. Love your show. Watch it all the time. It's fantastic. Or listen to it all the time, rather. It's fantastic. It gets me through my days. So really appreciate all the work that you put out. Thank you so much for coming on the show. You know this guy. You might not know this guy, but I am Jeremy Scholman at FF_Rebel. We're on Twitter. We're all over the place. Please follow us on YouTube. And with that said, we will see you next time.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.